They were going to show the galaxy what real survival skills looked like. On day 24, the ground started shaking. Yuna was gathering samples near the ruins when the first tremor hit. Small stones rolled down the ancient walls. Dust fell from between the stone blocks. Then a deeper rumble came from somewhere far underground. Minho was at her side within seconds. Seismic activity. We need to check the monitoring data. They ran back to camp where Yuna's datapad was receiving orbital scans from Taeyang. The news was bad. The planet's tectonic systems were more active than initial surveys had shown. A volcanic region 200 kilometers north was showing signs of eruption. Worse, the seismic activity was spreading. Taeyang says we need to evacuate, Yuna reported, reading the incoming messages. The original extraction point is too dangerous now. We need to reach the backup location, 50 kilometers northeast. Another tremor hit, stronger this time. A tree near their camp cracked and fell, crashing through the canopy. The jungle erupted with the sounds of panicked creatures fleeing. 50 kilometers through unknown terrain, Minho said, already assessing their situation. How much time do we have? 48 hours before the volcanic activity makes the atmosphere too dangerous for shuttle operations. Then we leave now. Take only what you can carry easily. Yuna looked at her equipment containers still sitting at the edge of the clearing. Weeks of expensive survey equipment. She picked through the items quickly, grabbing her datapad, some sample containers, and the emergency beacon. Everything else would have to stay. Minho's preparation was faster. He filled his water containers, grabbed his knife, wrapped some dried food in leaves, and was ready in under 5 minutes. They moved north through the jungle at a steady pace. Minho led, using his knife to mark their trail and clear obstacles. The ground continued to shake periodically, and in the distance they could hear rumbling that sounded like thunder but wasn't. By nightfall they had covered 15 kilometers. They made camp in a rocky area where falling trees were less of a danger. Minho built a quick shelter while Yuna updated their position to Taeyang. The pilot's response was tense. Seismic activity increasing faster than predicted. You need to maintain at least 12 kilometers per day to reach extraction on time. Galactic Council Representative Hyun is pushing for immediate emergency extraction. But I can't land safely in your current position. We'll make it, Yuna sent back, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. The next day started well. They covered 8 kilometers by midday, following a river that flowed roughly in the direction they needed to go. Then they reached the chasm. It was at least 30 meters across, with steep walls dropping into darkness. The river poured over the edge as a waterfall, disappearing into mist below. There was no way around. The chasm extended in both directions as far as they could see. We have to cross, Yuna said, but she couldn't see how. They had no bridge, no equipment for climbing, no way to span that distance. Minho stood at the edge, studying the opposite wall. There's a tree over there. If we can get a line across, we can make a rope bridge. With what rope? Yuna asked. Minho pulled out his paracord. He had maybe 20 meters total. Not enough, he admitted. Then he looked at the bamboo-like plants growing nearby. But we can make more. For the next 3 hours, Minho worked. He split the bamboo plants into thin strips and wove them into rope. His knife stripped bark, cut fibers, and shaped the materials. Yuna helped, following his instructions on how to braid the fibers for maximum strength. When they had enough rope, Minho made a grappling hook from rocks and more bamboo, bound together with the strongest fibers. He weighted it carefully, testing the balance. This is going to take a few tries, he said, beginning to swing the grappling hook. On his 4th attempt, it caught on a large root sticking out from the opposite wall. He tested it with his full weight. It held. I'll go first, he said. If it fails, you still have the rope and can try again. Yuna wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Minho was lighter and more experienced with this kind of crossing. He tied a safety line to himself, then began pulling himself across hand over hand on the rope. The makeshift grappling hook held. Within minutes, he was on the other side. Your turn, he called back. Take it slow. Yuna tied her small pack to her waist, grabbed the rope, and started crossing. Halfway across, she made the mistake of looking down. The chasm seemed bottomless. Her arm started shaking. Don't stop, Minho's voice cut through her fear. Keep moving. You can do this. She forced herself to keep pulling. Hand over hand. Don't think about falling. Don't think about the drop. Just the next grip, then the next. Then Minho's hands were pulling her up onto solid ground. They both lay on the rocky surface for a moment, catching their breath. Then another tremor hit, stronger than any before. Cracks appeared in the stone around them. "Move!" Minho hauled Yuna to her feet, and they ran from the chasm edge as the ground buckled. Behind them, part of the cliff wall collapsed, taking their rope with it. "That was too close," Yuna gasped. "It's going to get worse before it gets better," Minho said. "We need to cover more ground today." They pushed on, moving faster now. The jungle was changing. The vegetation was thinner here, the ground rockier. They were entering a different biome, one that was drier and more open. That night, Yuna began shivering uncontrollably. The temperature had dropped significantly in the new region, and her clothes were still damp from sweat and river crossings. Her teeth chattered so hard she couldn't speak properly. "Hypothermia," Minho said immediately. He had already been gathering firewood, but now he worked faster. "I need to get you warm quickly." Using his fire starter kit, he had flames going in under 2 minutes. Yuna had never seen someone start a fire so fast. The friction method he used created a coal almost instantly, which he transferred to prepared tinder. Within another minute, the fire was blazing. "Get close to the heat," he ordered. "I'll make something hot to drink." He boiled water and added some herbs he had gathered earlier. The tea tasted bitter but warming. Slowly, Yuna's shivering decreased. Minho wrapped her in his own dry shirt and built the fire higher. "You saved my life," she said when she could speak normally again. "Just using skills," Minho replied. But Yuna could see he had been worried. Hypothermia could kill quickly, and they were still 30 kilometers from extraction. By morning, Yuna felt better. They set out again, moving through increasingly difficult terrain. The seismic activity was constant now. Trees swayed without wind. Rocks tumbled down slopes. The air smelled like sulfur. On their final day, with the extraction point only 5 kilometers away, they encountered their last challenge. A rock slide had blocked the easiest path. They could go around, but it would add hours to their journey, hours they didn't have. "We climb over," Minho decided. The rocks were unstable, shifting with every tremor, but waiting wasn't an option. They climbed carefully, testing each handhold. Twice, stones broke free and tumbled away. Once, Yuna slipped, but Minho caught her arm before she fell. They helped each other, working as a true team. When they finally reached the extraction point, they found a clear plateau perfect for landing. Minho immediately began building a signal fire using the driest materials he could find. The smoke rose straight up, visible for kilometers. He also built a simple but sturdy shelter and made sure they had water and food. By the time Taeyang arrived in the shuttle 12 hours later, he found them rested, fed, and ready to leave. The pilot stared at them in disbelief. The rescue team that came down yesterday to check the area was exhausted from just flying here. "You two walked 50 kilometers through that chaos and you look better than they did." Minho smiled and patted his knife. "Good tools, good knowledge, good outcome." As the shuttle lifted off, Yuna looked down at Refuge 9. The planet had tested her in ways she never expected. It had destroyed her equipment, forced her past her limits, and taught her lessons she would never forget. She thought about the architects and their 573 items. She thought about her own 57 regulation items, most of which she had abandoned. Then she looked at Minho's single knife, still sharp and functional. "One knife," she said aloud. "Plenty," Minho replied, and they both smiled. Back on the station, Commander Veltis was receiving their final mission report. The other species representatives gathered to hear the results. Everyone had been monitoring the crisis. Everyone had opinions about whether the humans would make it. Representative Hyun had been especially vocal about requiring immediate evacuation. "Those humans are reckless," he had insisted. Their insufficient preparation nearly got them killed. But the data told a different story. Minho and Yuna had completed their 30-day mission, despite equipment failure, natural disasters, and emergency evacuation. They had not only survived, they had thrived. They had made discoveries about the architect civilization. They had documented new species. They had proven that preparation wasn't about carrying more items, but about having more knowledge. Commander Veltis looked at his own equipment checklist. At the 57 mandatory items he required all survey teams to carry. Then he looked at the report from Minho. The entrance to the ruins was partially collapsed, but Minho found a gap large enough to squeeze through. He went first, his knife ready in one hand and a torch in the other. The torch was just a branch wrapped with resin-soaked bark, but it gave off steady light and would burn for hours. Yuna followed, carrying her own torch and the datapad. The passage beyond was carved from solid stone, the wall smooth and covered in more of those strange symbols. Her breath echoed in the enclosed space. "Careful where you step," Minho said quietly. His voice was different here, focused and alert. Ancient ruins sometimes have traps. They moved slowly through the passages. Some sections had collapsed completely, forcing them to climb over rubble. Other sections were pristine, as if the builders had left yesterday. The air smelled stale but not dangerous. After 20 minutes of careful exploration, they entered a large chamber. The ceiling stretched high above them, disappearing into darkness. Banks of strange devices lined the walls, all dark and silent. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with what looked like a data terminal. "This is incredible," Yuna whispered. She approached the terminal and ran her hand over its surface. To her shock, lights flickered on. The terminal was still functional after who knew how many centuries. Symbols appeared on the screen. Yuna couldn't read them, but she activated her datapad and started recording everything. "Borum will want to see this. These are active systems, which means we need to be very careful," Minho said. He was examining the walls, looking for any sign of defensive systems or automated guardians. "Active systems can be dangerous," the terminal beeped. More symbols scrolled across the screen. Then surprisingly, a language translator function activated. The symbols began to change into standard galactic script. "It's a data log," Yuna said, reading quickly. "From a species called the Architects. This was one of their colony worlds." She scrolled through more entries. They were incredibly advanced. Automated everything. Their technology ran their entire civilization. Minho came over to read alongside her. The entries told a story that became increasingly disturbing. The Architects had reached a point where they no longer needed to do anything themselves. Machines grew their food. Machines built their homes. Machines even made decisions for them. Every aspect of life was automated and optimized. Then something went wrong. "A solar storm," Yuna read aloud. "Much worse than the one we experienced. It hit their central AI control system. Everything shut down at once." She scrolled faster. They couldn't restart it. And they couldn't survive without it. They had forgotten how to do basic tasks. How to grow food. How to purify water. How to build shelter. The final entries were desperate. The Architects tried to survive, but they lacked the fundamental knowledge. They had databases full of information, but no practical skills. They had warehouses full of raw materials, but no idea how to process them without machines. Within months, their colony had died out. They had everything except the ability to use it, Minho said quietly. He looked around the chamber with new understanding. All this advanced technology, and it killed them. A sudden movement caught Yuna's eye. One of the wall panels slid open. Something metallic emerged. A construct about 2 meters tall with multiple arms ending in various tools and weapons. Its optical sensors glowed red in the torchlight. "Guardian construct," Yuna said, backing away. "Defensive system must have activated when we accessed the terminal." The construct made a mechanical noise that sounded like speech. The terminal translated. "Unauthorized access detected. Initiating removal protocols." Yuna reached for her plasma deterrent device, then remembered it was broken. She had nothing. Minho pulled his knife and moved in front of her. "That won't work against armor," Yuna said urgently. "We need to run." "No room to run in here," Minho replied. His eyes were tracking the construct's movements. "We fight smart instead." The construct raised one arm. Energy crackled at its tip. It fired a bolt of electricity that scorched the stone where Minho had been standing. But he had already rolled aside, coming up next to one of the ancient devices on the wall. The construct fired again. Minho dove behind the device, using it as cover. The energy bolt hit the device instead, causing sparks to fly from damaged circuits. "It can't think creatively," Minho called out. "It's just following programmed responses." "We use that," Yuna understood. She grabbed a piece of rubble and threw it at the construct. It immediately turned and fired at the sound. While it was distracted, Minho moved to a different position. The construct was powerful but predictable. It responded to obvious threats but didn't anticipate strategy. Minho kept moving, drawing its fire while studying the room's layout. Yuna noticed what he was doing. He was maneuvering the construct toward a section where water was seeping down the wall from the damaged sections above. "Keep it distracted," Minho shouted. He was working on something with his knife, carving at one of the wall panels. Yuna threw another rock. The construct fired again, missing her by meters. It started to move toward her position, its heavy footsteps echoing through the chamber. "Now," Minho yelled. He had carved through a panel and exposed ancient wiring behind it. Using his knife, he pried a piece of metal conduit loose. Water from the seepage immediately began flowing along the conduit. Minho directed it toward the construct, using the metal to channel the water. The construct stepped into the growing puddle, just as Minho jammed his knife into the exposed wiring. Electricity arced through the water, straight into the construct's lower joints. Sparks exploded. The machine jerked and spasmed, its systems overloading. Then it collapsed, smoke rising from its joints. Minho pulled his knife free and stepped back, breathing hard. "Water and electricity. Works every time." Yuna stared at the disabled construct. "You just defeated an ancient security system with environmental awareness and basic physics. It was built to fight weapons, not thinking," Minho said. He checked his knife for damage and found none. Another lesson. Technology fails when it can't adapt. They moved deeper into the ruins, finding more chambers. One room contained what looked like an emergency survival vault. Inside were hundreds of items, tools, supplies, equipment, enough to survive any disaster. Except the architects hadn't been able to use any of it. The items required knowledge they had lost. Yuna counted them. 573 individual items, all carefully catalogued and stored, all useless without the skills to apply them. "This is what Commander Veltis wanted me to do," Minho said, looking at the vault. "Carry hundreds of items just in case." But these people had everything they could possibly need. And they still died because they didn't have the one thing that mattered. "Knowledge," Yuna said, "and the ability to adapt." Minho picked up one of the items, a sophisticated water purification device. "This is probably better than anything we have on the station. But if it breaks, it's just metal and plastic. The ability to purify water using natural methods? That's forever." Back on the station, a human archaeologist named Nari was receiving their transmitted data. Her response came through the emergency beacon. "This is the third extinct civilization we've found with this pattern. They over-specialized in technology until they couldn't function without it. When systemic failure occurred, they lacked the fundamental skills to survive." Yuna thought about her own experience over the past 2 weeks. The electromagnetic storm had destroyed her equipment. If Minho hadn't been there, would she have survived? Probably not. She had been as dependent on her technology as the architects had been on theirs. "Humans are different," Yuna said, more to herself than to Minho. "We kept our basic survival skills even after developing advanced technology." "Not just kept them," Minho corrected. "We value them. Every human culture has survival traditions. We teach our children how to make fire, how to find food, how to build shelter, not because we need those skills in modern life, but because we remember what happens when you forget them." They spent another hour documenting the ruins, then carefully made their way back to the surface. The jungle felt welcoming after the dead halls of the architects. It was alive, dynamic, and full of challenges that could be overcome with knowledge and skill. That evening, as they sat by their fire, Yuna looked at her broken equipment with new eyes. It wasn't that technology was bad. Technology was wonderful, but treating it as a replacement for fundamental knowledge was dangerous. "The architects made themselves obsolete," she said. Minho nodded. "And that's why other species in the galaxy think humans are either crazy or scary. We refuse to make ourselves obsolete. We keep the old skills alive even when we don't strictly need them. Just in case." "Just in case," Yuna repeated. She touched her stone knife, still hanging from her belt. 2 weeks ago, she would have thought carrying such a primitive tool was ridiculous. Now she understood it represented something more, important than any high-tech device. Could the accumulated knowledge of countless generations who learned to survive by adapting instead of depending. Above them, stars began to appear between the gaps in the canopy. Somewhere up there, Commander Veltis was monitoring their progress. Somewhere up there, other species were watching to see if humans. The storm came without warning on day 12. Yuna was examining plant samples near a small stream when the sky suddenly darkened. The air pressure changed so fast her ears popped. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in less than a minute. Minho, she called out. He was already moving back toward their camp, his movements quick but controlled. Electromagnetic storm. I saw the clouds forming wrong. We need to get everything secured now. They ran back to the clearing. The wind picked up, bending the massive trees and sending leaves flying. Then the rain started, heavy drops that felt like stones hitting exposed skin. Within seconds, everything was soaked. Yuna's shelter dome started flickering. The power indicator flashed red. No, 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 she muttered, hitting the reset button. The dome collapsed into a pile of wet fabric. The electromagnetic interference was scrambling its systems. She grabbed her equipment containers and tried to activate them. Nothing. The anti-gravity fields were dead. She tried her communicator, static, the water purifier, not responding. One by one, every piece of her carefully packed technology stopped working. Minho's voice cut through the sound of rain. Help me with this! He had already pulled branches across the platform shelter, creating a denser roof. The leaves channeled water away instead of letting it pool. Yuna ran over and helped him secure the corners with vines he had already prepared and hung to dry. Get under here, he said. Stay dry. I need to protect our supplies. While Yuna huddled under the improved shelter, Minho worked in the rain. He wrapped their food stores in large leaves and bark. He moved anything that could be damaged by water under natural overhangs in the rock formations nearby. He dug a small trench around their fire pit to prevent flooding. His knife never stopped moving, cutting, shaping, digging. The storm lasted 6 hours. When it finally passed, the jungle was transformed. Water ran everywhere. The air smelled clean but felt oppressively heavy. And Yuna's equipment was scattered across the clearing, every piece dark and silent. She picked up her medical kit and tried to power it on. Nothing. The ration heater was full of water. The plasma deterrent device showed a cracked power cell. Even her backup power units wouldn't activate. The electromagnetic storm had fried everything electronic. This can't be happening, she said. Her voice sounded small in the post-storm quiet. The equipment is supposed to be hardened against electromagnetic interference. It's supposed to be survivable. Minho squeezed water out of his shirt. Supposed to be and actually is are two different things. What do we need most right now? Water, I guess. But my purifier is dead. Then we boil it. Minho had already restarted the fire using dry materials he had stored in a waterproof cache inside a hollow tree. The flames grew quickly. He had made clay containers earlier in the week, practicing pottery techniques. Now he filled them with water and set them near the flames. What about food? Yuna asked. My rations are ruined. The heater is broken. We have fish traps in the stream, fruit from the trees and edible roots. Minho pulled out several items from his waterproof bundle, all things he had gathered or made. Plus, I caught something interesting this morning. He revealed a creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a lizard. Already cleaned and ready to cook. Yuna's stomach growled despite herself. She had been eating her regulation rations for nearly 2 weeks, and while they were nutritious, they were boring. The smell of actual cooking meat made her realize how much she missed real food. Over the next few days, Yuna had to learn everything Minho had been trying to teach her, but now without any technological backup. When she cut her hand on a sharp rock, her sophisticated medical kit was useless. Minho cleaned the wound with boiled water, applied antiseptic paste made from plants, and wrapped it with clean bark fiber. How did you know which plants to use? She asked. There's a xenobotanist on the station named Borum, Minho replied. She sent me a database before we left. I memorized the medicinal plants. Also, some things are universal. Plants with certain chemical smells usually have antibacterial properties. Sap from certain trees can seal wounds. You learn to recognize patterns. The wound healed better than expected. Yuna looked at her medical kit, with its laser sutures and synthetic skin grafts and auto-injectors, and realized it was just expensive weight now. Minho's knowledge and a few plants had done the same job. She started paying more attention to how he used his knife. It wasn't just a cutting tool. The pommel worked as a hammer when he needed to drive stakes into the ground. The serrated edge worked as a saw when he needed to cut through thick branches. The point worked as a drill when twisted against wood. The flat of the blade worked as a shovel for small digging tasks. The spine of the blade struck against stones to create sparks for fire starting. One knife. Dozens of uses. It never needed batteries or recalibration. It never stopped working because of electromagnetic interference. As long as Minho kept it clean and occasionally sharpened it on river stones, it would keep working forever. "Every tool you carry is a skill you didn't learn," Minho said one evening. They were sitting by the fire, and Yuna was trying to make her own knife from a piece of sharp stone. When you have a device that purifies water automatically, you never learn how to purify water yourself. When it breaks, you're helpless. But learning everything takes time, Yuna protested. "That's why we have technology, to save time." "Technology is great when it works," Minho agreed. "But it makes you weak when it fails. Balance is important. Use technology, but don't depend on it. Keep your fundamental skills sharp." Yuna thought about her own training. She had spent years learning xenobiology, chemistry, and computer systems, but she had never learned how to make a fire without electronic assistance. She had never learned which wild plants were safe to eat. She had never learned how to navigate without GPS satellites. She had knowledge, but it was narrow knowledge, specialized knowledge. Minho's knowledge was broader and more fundamental. It worked anywhere, under any conditions. By day 16, Yuna had abandoned most of her heavy equipment. She kept a few items that still worked: the emergency beacon, some sample containers, her datapad for notes when it occasionally powered on. Everything else stayed in the clearing, too heavy and too useless to carry. She learned to move through the jungle the way Minho did, reading the terrain, watching for natural trails, listening to warning calls from creatures. Her observation skills sharpened. She started to see the patterns he talked about. One afternoon, they discovered ancient structures partially hidden by vegetation, stone walls covered in vines, strange symbols carved into massive blocks, evidence of a civilization that had lived here long ago. "Report this to Borum," Minho said, taking samples of the stone. "This is a significant discovery." Yuna activated her datapad and was surprised when it worked. The battery had somehow survived the storm. She sent a quick message through the emergency beacon's communication system. Within an hour, Borum responded with excitement. The xenobotanist's message was full of technical details about preliminary scans from orbit, but one line stood out. "Be careful. Preliminary analysis shows advanced technology in those ruins. Unknown if still active." Yuna looked at the ancient structures with new concern. Advanced technology meant potential danger, but it also meant answers. Why had this civilization disappeared? What happened to them? As the sun set behind the trees, Minho stood looking at the ruins, his knife hanging from his belt. "Tomorrow we explore," he said. "But carefully. Whoever built this had technology far beyond what we saw so far." Yuna nodded. Her broken equipment suddenly seemed less important compared to the mystery before them. She had survived 2 weeks on Refuge 9 with failing technology. She had learned skills she never knew existed. And now she was about to discover secrets of an ancient civilization. She touched the knife Minho had given her earlier that day, a simple stone blade she had made herself under his guidance. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. And more importantly, she understood how it worked. She could make an The shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by massive trees. Yuna felt the slight bump as the landing gear made contact with solid ground. Through the viewport, she could see thick vegetation in every direction. The trees had purple-tinted bark and enormous leaves that blocked out most of the sky. Everything looked wet and alive. "Atmospheric analysis complete," the shuttle's computer announced. "Oxygen content 23%. Humidity 91%. Temperature 32 degrees Celsius. Air is breathable, but recommend hydration protocols." Minho was already opening the hatch. Hot, wet air rushed into the shuttle's cool interior. The smell hit Yuna immediately. Rich earth, decaying plants, and something else she couldn't identify. The sounds came next. Buzzing, clicking, chirping noises from dozens of unseen creatures. "Welcome to the jungle," Minho said. He stepped out onto the ramp, took a deep breath, and smiled. "Not bad. I've worked in worse." Yuna activated her equipment containers and they floated down the ramp on anti-gravity fields. Minho just walked down with his backpack on his shoulders. The pilot, a human named Taiyang, watched them from the cockpit. "I'll be monitoring from orbit," Taiyang said through the comm system. "Daily check-ins at 0800 hours. Emergency beacon will reach me in under 3 minutes if needed. Good luck down there." The shuttle's engines powered up and it lifted off, disappearing above the canopy within seconds. Suddenly, the jungle felt much bigger and much more present. Yuna looked around at the dense vegetation and realized something immediately. Her floating containers were useless here. The trees are too close together, she said. I can't get the containers through. Minho pulled his knife from its sheath. Then we carry what we need and come back for the rest. He walked to the edge of the clearing and started cutting through thick vines that blocked their path. Each swing of the knife was efficient and controlled. The blade moved through the vegetation like it was nothing. Yuna opened one container and started pulling out equipment. The shelter dome, the water purifier, the ration heater, the medical kit. She tried to organize everything in order of importance, but there was so much. How was she supposed to carry all this? Just take the essentials for now, Minho called back. He was already several meters into the jungle, cutting a path. We'll establish a base camp in the clearing, then make trips for the rest. But what were the essentials? Yuna grabbed the shelter dome kit and a medical supply bag. Together, they weighed about 15 kilograms. She lifted them and started following Minho's path. Within 5 minutes, her arms were aching. The humidity made everything feel heavier. Sweat ran down her face. Minho, meanwhile, moved through the jungle like he had lived there his whole life. He didn't just cut plants randomly. He chose his path carefully, finding natural gaps in the vegetation and only cutting what was necessary. He moved smoothly, never wasting energy. By the time they established a proper campsite, still in the clearing but under the shelter of some large trees, Yuna was exhausted. She activated her shelter dome and watched it inflate into a perfect 3-meter hemisphere, climate-controlled interior, insect-proof mesh, emergency backup power, all the comforts of the survey station in a portable package. Minho looked at the dome and nodded. Nice, he said. Then he started gathering long branches from the jungle floor. What are you doing? Yuna asked. Building shelter. But I have the shelter dome. We can both fit inside. I know, Minho said. But what happens if it breaks? Or the power fails? Better to practice now while there's no emergency. He arranged the branches in a rough frame, then started weaving smaller branches and large leaves between them. His knife shaped the wood, cut notches for joints, and stripped bark for binding. Yuna watched him work. Within 2 hours, he had built a raised platform bed about a meter off the ground, with a roof made of overlapping leaves. It wasn't as neat as her dome, but it looked surprisingly solid. Why raise it off the ground? She asked. Keeps you away from ground insects, allows airflow underneath, and if it rains, the water runs below instead of pooling where you sleep. Minho tested the platform by sitting on it. It held his weight easily. Plus, if something nasty comes by at night, I'm above its direct line of sight. That night, as they sat by a small fire, Minho had started using his fire starter kit. They heard sounds in the jungle. Heavy footsteps. Something breathing. Something big. Yuna immediately reached for her plasma deterrent device. It was designed to emit a painful but non-lethal energy burst that would scare away most predators. She powered it on and aimed it toward the sound. Minho picked up a rock. What are you doing? Yuna whispered. Use a weapon. This is a weapon, Minho replied calmly. The footsteps came closer. Yellow eyes reflected the firelight from between the trees. Something growled, low and threatening. Minho stood up, made himself as large as possible, and threw the rock hard at the eyes. It connected with a solid thunk. The creature yelped in surprise. Get out of here, Minho shouted, his voice loud and aggressive. This is my territory, go. He picked up another rock and threw it. This one hit a tree near the creature, making a loud bang. The yellow eyes blinked, then disappeared. The footsteps retreated into the jungle. Whatever it was decided this clearing wasn't worth the trouble. Yuna lowered her plasma device, her hands shaking slightly. That actually worked? Predators are the same everywhere, Minho said, sitting back down. They want easy food, not a fight. Make yourself look dangerous and make a lot of noise, and most of them will leave you alone. Save your high-tech stuff for when you really need it. Over the next 3 days, Yuna started to see patterns she had never noticed before. Minho wasn't just surviving in the jungle, he was reading it. He could tell which plants were edible by their leaf patterns. He found water by watching where insects congregated. He made fishing hooks from small pieces of his knife's handle mounting. He created containers from sections of the bamboo-like plants. Every time Yuna reached for a piece of her equipment, Minho showed her another way to solve the problem using what the jungle provided. Need to purify water? Boil it. Need to cook food? Use hot rocks in a bark container. Need to mark your trail? Break branches in specific patterns. On the third evening, As Yuna updated their mission log, she realized something strange. She had stopped using most of her equipment. The shelter dome sat unused while she slept on the platform Minho had taught her to build. The ration heater was off because food cooked over fire tasted better. The plasma deterrent stayed in its case because rocks and loud voices worked fine. "You're teaching me," she said to Minho. He looked up from the spear he was carving. "Teaching you what?" "How to actually survive. Not just how to keep myself alive with technology, but how to live in a place like this." Minho smiled. "Every environment has patterns. Water flows downhill. Predators avoid loud groups. Edible plants usually have certain characteristics. Once you learn to see those patterns, you don't need complex equipment. You just need to pay attention. Is that why you only brought a knife?" "The knife is just a tool," Minho said. "The real survival kit is here." He tapped his head. "And here?" He tapped his chest. "Knowledge and adaptability. Those don't run out of battery power." Yuna looked at her 3 equipment containers still sitting at the edge of the clearing and felt something shift in her understanding. She had thought being prepared meant having equipment for every possible situation, but Minho had shown her that being prepared meant having the knowledge to handle situations she couldn't predict. "Technology fails," Minho said, testing the point of his spear against his thumb. "Skills don't." High above the planet, Taeyang sat in the shuttle monitoring their vital signs and location markers. According to all the sensors, both humans were healthy, active, and doing well, but something puzzled him. Yuna's equipment was showing minimal power usage, almost like she wasn't using it at all. He made a note in his log to ask about that during tomorrow's check-in. For now, though, everything The cargo bay doors hissed open, and Yuna stepped through carrying 3 large equipment containers. She set them down with a heavy thud that echoed across the metal floor of Galactic Survey Station, Omega-7. Each container bore the standard Survey Corp markings and a long list of contents printed on the side. "Commander," Feltis turned all 6 of his compound eyes toward her. The insectoid officer clicked his mandibles together, and what Yuna had learned meant approval. His chitinous body gleamed under the station's bright lights as he approached her equipment. "Excellent preparation. Specialist Yuna," Feltis said, running one of his 4 arms across the container labels. "Standard Protocol 17. All 57 required items present and accounted for, I assume?" "Yes, Commander," Yuna replied. She brushed a strand of black hair from her face and glanced at her datapad. "Atmospheric processor, emergency beacon, medical kit levels 1 through 3, ration packs for 45 days, water purification system, shelter dome, plasma deterrent device, and 50 other essential items. Everything by the book." Feltis made a pleased clicking sound. "This is how proper survey work is conducted. The regulations exist for good reason. Refuge 9 is an unexplored world. Unknown dangers, unknown resources, unknown everything. We must be prepared for all possibilities." The quartermaster, a human woman named Hana, walked over with her own datapad. She had been working on the station for 3 years and knew the protocols inside and out. "Your partner should be arriving soon," she told Yuna. "Another human. Name is Minho. Former military, now a civilian survival specialist." "Good," Yuna said. 2 humans working together should make this mission easier." 20 minutes later, the cargo bay doors opened again. Minho walked through carrying a single backpack. It looked old and worn, the kind of pack someone might take on a weekend hiking trip back on Earth. He walked with an easy confidence, his movements relaxed and efficient. Hana's mouth fell open. Feltis stopped moving entirely, which for his species indicated extreme shock. Yuna stared at the small backpack, then at her 3 large containers, then back at the backpack. "You must have more equipment coming," Feltis finally said. His voice had taken on a sharp edge. "This is clearly just your personal effects." Minho set the backpack down gently and smiled. "No, Commander. This is everything." "Everything?" Feltis's voice rose higher. "That is impossible. Protocol 17 requires 57 items minimum for a 30-day survey mission on an unexplored planet. Where are your atmospheric processors, your emergency rations, your medical supplies?" "Don't need them," Minho said simply. He unzipped the backpack and pulled out its contents one by one. A large knife in a leather sheath, a small metal container with water purification tablets, a fire starter kit, Several lengths of paracord wound into neat bundles. A small emergency beacon, still in its wrapper. That was everything. Hana walked over and looked into the empty backpack as if more equipment might be hiding in some secret pocket. Minho, you can't be serious. The regulations are there for safety. Refuge 9 could have toxic atmosphere, dangerous predators, poisonous plants. Then I'll deal with them, Minho interrupted gently. He picked up the knife and held it up. The blade was about 20 centimeters long, sharp on one edge and serrated on the other. The handle looked well used, wrapped in cord that had been replaced many times. This is all I need. Well, and the knowledge to use it. Velthus made a sound like air escaping from a punctured container. Absolutely not. I cannot authorize this mission with such inadequate preparation. You are putting yourself and Specialist Yuna at risk. Commander, Minho said, his voice still calm. My species evolved on a world full of things trying to kill us. We didn't have plasma weapons or atmospheric processors. We had rocks and sticks in our brains. We learned to survive with less than this. Your species also died frequently from preventable causes. Velthus countered. That is why the Galactic Council established these protocols. To prevent unnecessary death. Yuna had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up. Commander, if I may. Minho is my assigned partner. I have all the standard equipment. If something happens, he can use my supplies. The protocols exist for both team members, Velthus said firmly. His mandibles clicked in agitation. What if you become separated? What if your equipment fails? Then I improvise, Minho said. He sat down on one of Yuna's equipment containers, completely at ease. Commander, I've survived in deserts, jungles, frozen mountains, and ocean islands with less gear than this. I've trained others to do the same. The regulation kit you want me to carry, those are training wheels. They're good for people who don't know how to survive without technology. And you consider yourself above such needs? Velthus's tone was icy, not above them, beyond them. Minho picked up his knife again. This knife can be 100 different tools depending on how I use it. It can cut, pry, hammer, dig, defend, hunt, and build. Your 57 items can only do 57 specific things. When you run out of battery power or replacement parts, they become useless. This knife will work until the metal wears away, which won't happen in 30 days. Hana crossed her arms. You're being stubborn. I'm being practical, Minho replied. But I understand the regulations exist for good reasons. Tell you what, Commander. He picked up the still-wrapped emergency beacon. I'll take this. That makes it 58 items total if you count my knife and gear. The beacon will let you track me and call for rescue if I somehow manage to get myself killed. Velthus was silent for a long moment. His compound eyes looked at Minho, then at Yuna's properly packed equipment, then back at Minho's tiny pile of gear. You truly believe this is sufficient? I know it is, and if you're wrong? Minho smiled. Then you can write in your report that the human was an arrogant fool. But Commander, I won't be wrong. Another long silence filled the cargo bay. Finally, Velthus made a gesture with two of his arms that indicated reluctant acceptance.
Very well.
Against my better judgment, I will approve this mission, but you will activate that beacon at the first sign of trouble. You will check in daily. And if I determine at any point that your insufficient preparation is endangering this mission, I will abort it immediately. Understood? Understood, Commander. Thank you. As Velthus walked away, still clicking his mandibles in disapproval, Hana leaned close to Minho. You know everyone on this station thinks humans are crazy, right? I know, Minho said, repacking his small backpack. They thought we were crazy when we climbed out of our caves with pointed sticks and decided to hunt animals 10 times our size. They thought we were crazy when we crossed oceans in wooden boats. They thought we were crazy when we strapped ourselves to rockets and flew into space. He zipped the backpack closed. Being crazy is kind of our thing. Yuna looked at her 3 heavy containers, then at Minho's single small pack. A small doubt crept into her mind. She had followed every regulation, packed every required item. She was prepared for anything. But watching Minho's casual confidence, she wondered if maybe preparation meant something different to him. Something she didn't quite understand yet. Ready to go? Minho asked her. Yuna took a